Weirwood trees are a focal point in A Song of Ice and Fire. We see weirwood used throughout the story, but that raises the question, does weirwood maintain its magic after being cut? Welcome back to the Fae of Ice and Fire series, where we examine magical phenomena in the context of real-world Fae lore. This video can be watched on its own, but it builds on theories presented in past videos, so you may want to check out the playlist linked in the description first. In the last video, we concluded that the bones on Naga's Hill are actually weirwood that had been shaped to serve as the ribs of a longship. That longship is likely the burial site of the Grey King, which explains how the wood petrified and now has a stony texture. But if we assert that Naga's ribs still hold weirwood magic, that begs the question, what other pieces of weirwood have we seen, and might those pieces also hold magic? Let's begin by considering every instance of weirwood used after being cut from the tree. I did my best to be thorough, but may have missed some, so please let me know in the comments if there are any not mentioned here. To start with, there are a few instances of weirwood stumps retaining some amount of magical influence. Jamie has a prophetic dream about Brienne when he sleeps with his head on a weirwood stump. Likewise, the ghost of Highheart acknowledges that Thoros' fires won't reveal anything to him while he's surrounded by the weirwood stumps on the hill. The trees at Highheart had been cut down, but at least some of their power remained. But what about weirwood that has been removed from the ground entirely? Our first category is weirwood shaped into tools or implements. The ancient children of the forest are said to have used weirwood bows, as did the Raven's Teeth, Bloodraven's personal guard. Fans also speculate that Torrhen Stark's brother, Brandon Snow, appeared in Bran's vision of the Winterfell godswood, cutting strips of weirwood to fashion into dragon-killing arrows. As we discussed in a previous video, the pact between the children and the First Men was formed to protect the Weirwoods. Since the children and the First Men seem to have engaged in this practice, we can hypothesize that cutting strips or taking branches does not harm the weirwood trees themselves. It is also reasonable to assume that the children and the First Men believed weirwood to carry some magical power or significance. The High Septon's staff is also made of weirwood. The Faith of the Seven considers white to represent purity, so it's possible that the High Septon used the wood for its color. Alternatively, it could be a holdover showing of good faith towards worshippers of the old gods from a time when the faith was new to Westeros. In the last video, we also discussed Galen Whitestaff. To summarize, he was a significant religious figure in Iron Island's history and may have been responsible for the legend of Naga's ribs. He was called Galen Whitestaff for the staff he carried, and in-world historians have asserted that his staff was made of either weirwood or Naga's bones. These instances of weirwood tools are interesting, but ultimately don't tell us much. Fortunately, we have 3 more categories to examine. The next up is building materials. Weirwood was used to construct Whitewall's castle, Harrenhal, and, according to legend, the original Greenfield castle was made entirely of weirwood. We should note that there are no mention of weirwood structures built by the Children of the Forest. Likewise, there are no documented First Men weirwood structures from the Age of Heroes. We don't know much about Greenfield. Its exact location has been lost to time, but the Maesters believe it was built during the Dawn Age, before the First Men made their pact with the Children. We have more information about White Walls and Harrenhal since we have point-of-view chapters at both locations. In the first book, Catelyn notes that the rafters and beams of Harrenhal were all weirwood. Harrenhal is famously said to be cursed and haunted, built by the cruel king Harren the Black and melted in dragonfire by Aegon the Conqueror almost immediately after construction. White Walls had a similar story as Harrenhal's, from construction to destruction. Both castles were built in the Riverlands near the God's Eye, long after the Andals invaded Westeros. Nicknamed the Milk House for its white marble walls and weirwood rafters, White Walls was the second castle of House Butterwell, built around 171 AC. Most notably, it was the site of the tourney in the Mystery Night. Fans of the Dunk and Egg novellas will remember that the Second Blackfire Rebellion was quashed there before it began. After the plot was uncovered, Bloodraven announced that he would pull the castle down stone by stone and sow the earth with salt. His official reason was to prevent it from becoming a pilgrimage site like the Redgrass Field, but it's possible that he had another reason. Out of all the human characters we meet in the story, Bloodraven has the closest connection to the Weirwoods, literally and figuratively. While it seems possible to take strips or branches from Weirwoods without harming the trees, Harrenhal and Whitewalls both used trunks of Weirwood trees as rafters. And both castles were destroyed a relatively short time after construction was completed. As we noted earlier, there is still power in Weirwood stumps and roots, but cutting down the trees does seem to harm them since there is no evidence that they can regrow or regenerate from stumps. And we know that the first men agreed to stop harming the Weirwoods as part of their pact with the children, so Bloodraven's purpose in destroying Whitewalls may have been to remove and cleanse the site of what he would see as egregious sacrilege. Somewhere between Weirwood tools and Weirwood buildings, we have Weirwood furniture. Specifically, we see the throne at the Eyrie, the chairs at the House of Black and White, and the Kingsguard table in the White Sword Tower. The Kingsguard table, like the High Septon's staff, could be an outlier, an instance where Weirwood was used for its color rather than its magical potential or significance, since the Kingsguard color is white. They wear white cloaks, they live in the White Sword Tower, etc. However, if it was meant to have any additional significance, it was likely intended for some sort of protection, since the table is carved in the shape of a shield. The Weirwood chairs, on the other hand, have clear symbolic parallels. In the last video, we noted that the Grey King's throne was made from Naga's jaws, according to legend. However, we determined that the other sea dragon bone objects from the story, the ribs, the crown, and the white staff, were all made from weirwood. Unlike weirwood tools and structures, whose intended magical purpose we can only guess at, weirwood chairs have a clear significance within this story. Beric Dondarrion and Bloodraven are both depicted on thrones of living weirwood roots. In Bloodraven's case, the connection is literal as we see the roots growing into and through him. Beric's connection isn't so literal, but it is still significant. Beric associates with the ghost of High Heart and the Lady of the Leaves, and his weirwood throne is inside the Hollow Hill. Thoros says that Beric has been chosen by the Lord of Light, but his story is woven throughout with symbols and servants of the old gods. Looking at the three instances of weirwood chairs, we immediately see a pattern. The Grey King's throne on the Iron Islands, the throne at the Eyrie, and the Faceless Men's chairs in Braavos are all in locations we are explicitly told cannot support tree growth. This cannot be an accident or a coincidence. Considering the religious significance of weirwood thrones to the Greenseers, we could be looking at an attempt to preserve a connection to the old gods in places where the weirwood trees originally couldn't reach. We discussed the significance of weirwood on the Iron Islands in the last video, but there is fan speculation to carry this idea through to the other locations. Multiple people have identified the likelihood that Robin Arryn has latent warging abilities. This seems far-fetched at first glance, but consider that all of his Stark cousins have warging powers. If Fey magic or the ability to warg animals is matrilineal, Sweet Robin is equally likely as the Stark children to have inherited magical abilities from their maternal grandmother, Minicia Wint, the mother of Lysa and Catelyn. Like Bran, Robin appears to hear things psychically in his dreams. He complains about Marillion singing even after Marillion is executed. In the House of Black and White, Arya waits on servants of the many-faced god as they sit in the weirwood and ebony chairs, deciding who will carry out the prayers of various supplicants. Arya herself selects a weirwood chair to sit in when she accepts her first assassination assignment, perhaps to indicate a parallel between Arya and Sweet Robin, characters who sit in weirwood chairs while deciding matters of life and death. Many people believe that Jaqen selected Arya to train at the House of Black and White because of her innate warging ability. For many years, I didn't buy into this theory until I began to see the Weirwood and water connections outlined in this series. To bring it back to the real world for a moment, remember that the Eastscheed are known to live underground in times of peril, have power over animals, and use glamour to change their appearances. The House of Black and White will have its own video in the series, but consider for a moment that Arya passes the blindness test by seeing through the eyes of a cat. Power over animals. Additionally, in Feast, when Arya asks the kindly man about changing her face, he said that it takes years to learn to work a proper glamour. Braavos may be on the other side of the Narrow Sea, but it now seems to be far closer to Westerosi magic than we might have first believed. This idea is tied together by our last collection of Weirwood objects, the doors. First, we have the Black Gate under the Night Fort, described in A Storm of Swords. The Black Gate, Sam had called it, but it wasn't black at all. It was white weirwood, and there was a face on it. A glow came from the wood, like milk in moonlight, so faint it scarcely seemed to touch anything beyond the door itself, not even Sam, standing right before it. We are not told explicitly why the Black Gate was installed, but a popular fan theory is that the Night's King used it to deliver human sacrifices to the others. Considering the First Men's history of blood sacrifice to the Weirwood trees, and stories of the Night's King's sacrifices after declaring himself king at the Night Fort, this theory does not seem far-fetched. In fact, it is cemented further when we consider the Moon Door at the Eyrie. Lysa Arryn explains that there is no headsman at the Eyrie, only a Weirwood door with a crescent moon carving that opens onto thin air. Criminals at the Eyrie are typically executed by way of a 600-foot plummet down the side of the mountain. Some parallels immediately stand out. The Black Gate is described as glowing like moonlight, and the Moon Door is decorated with a crescent moon carving. The Moon Door was designed for executions, and the Black Gate is thought to have been used to deliver human sacrifices to the others. If we accept the idea that Weirwood chairs are meant to be proxies for Weirwood root thrones, it's logical to assume that the Moon Door was designed to serve a similar purpose as the Black Gate, another method to deliver human sacrifice to the Fae, through Weirwood gates. And for those who might wonder whether the sacrifice would be acceptable, recall that beyond the wall, characters recognize the idea of a sky burial. Jon Snow witnesses such a burial after it's determined that Ygritte's deceased companion cannot be burned. In that instance, the purpose was to feed the body to shadow cats to prevent the man from returning as a wight. But throwing a body from a great height must have been a recognized custom to some degree, since sky burial is a term recognized by the Free Folk and the Night's Watch Rangers. This may be looking too far afield, however. If the Weirwood Moon Door is meant to serve as a proxy for a Weirwood tree or the Black Gate, what matters is that the sacrifice is sent through the door alive. Before we conclude, there are 3 other Weirwood doors mentioned in the story. Interestingly, all of them are described as Weirwood and ebony, or black and white. The doors of Tobomot's shop in King's Landing, the doors that Dany sees in the House of the Undying that lead to the false wizards, and, of course, the doors of the House of Black and White. In trying to identify a pattern, I realized that all 3 sets of doors have origins in or ties to Essos. Tobomot resides in King's Landing, but he is notably from Qohor and claims to be one of the few armorers who can work Valyrian steel. Qohor is a forested area where the residents are suspected of practicing human sacrifice. As we've covered in previous videos, the House of the Undying is clearly meant to be a parallel to Bloodraven's Cave, with it looking like a burial mound in a grove of black trees with blue leaves. And the House of Black and White has even more ties and parallels to Westeros and Westerosi magic. The black pools and secret lower levels are reminiscent of Winterfell. Combined with the hints at Fae magic like glamour, I believe we are meant to see a connection between the Faceless Men of Braavos and the Greenseers of Westeros, and now, with this added information about the Black and White doors, perhaps also a connection to the armorers and magic users of Qohor. Today's video has covered a lot of evidence and parallels with very few conclusions. I believe that an examination of Ebony in the story is required to get a full picture, but that will have to wait for next time. If you don't want to miss it, hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you want to help select topics for future videos, consider subscribing to my Patreon, which is linked below. A big shout out and thank you to my top tier subscribers, Tom Silver and Zach from the club. You can also find links in the description to the pages of artists whose work were included in this video. Until next time.